Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on this rainy, gray November afternoon. I'm Julia Caron. I'll be your host, your interviewer this afternoon with Dr. Norma Dunning. But before we get into our conversation, I'd just like to thank all of the people who helped make this edition of the festival possible, the 12th edition of the Salon du Livre des Premières Nations. This activity is presented in code. I have it in French in front of me now, so I'm doing live translation. It's presented by Kwahiatonhk et la Bibliothèque de Québec in the context of the 12th edition of the Salon du Livre des Premières Nations, presented by TELUS, and it's produced by Kwahiatonhk. The 2023 edition is made possible thanks to partnerships with the CN, Innergex Énergie Renouvelable, Hydro-Québec, la Caisse Desjardins de Wendake, OKT Law, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Government of Canada, the Government of Quebec, the SODEC, the City of Quebec, and the CDFM of huron-wendat. So now that we've got that out of the way, we can dive into a conversation with Norma Dunning. Welcome, Norma.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody for coming out. It's just beautiful to be here.
Thanks for being with us. Before we get started, I was wondering if we could actually begin with a reading. And we were taking a look at this book put together by Drew Hayden Taylor called Me Tomorrow. And we're going to read just a snippet for you to have a taste of some of Norma's writing.
Now, we had said a snippet, but how long is a snippet? I'm going to read, I think I'll read just about all of it. It's quite long, so if you need to have a nap or just doze off for a little bit, you could do that. I've timed it out over and over again, and I told Juliet it's like 12 minutes. I can't get it under 12 minutes unless I read really, really fast. And when I was asked to come into this anthology, it was what Drew Hayden Taylor wanted was for all the Indigenous writers to think about the future of indigeneity in Canada, or future us. And so I wrote Future We, Inuit. Are we allowed to dream? Are we allowed to exceed the parameters of a reality that Canada has no interest in? Are we allowed to be more and better and complete? Aren't we all supposed to stay in the time of long ago, the time of standing at a seal breathing hole with a harpoon pointing towards small shivers of ice water, a time of long patience and short lives, a time of used to be that Inuit knew their place, used to be that Inuit only stayed north of 60 and not south, used to be that Inuit never spoke unless there was a camera in front of them, used to be that Inuit kept their faces out of media unless they were dead or dying, used to be that Inuit could go hungry and no one had to deal with it, used to be that Inuit were used to being the people thought of as cute and cuddly, used to being the people who were savagely sexy, fuck Eskimo and white is not all right, used to be the white one's doormat, used to being the place where all the excrement of whiteness laid their visceral leftovers, puddles of sperm, puddles of snot, used to being human spittoons, used to being a disc number and not a name, used to being moved around, Bedouins of the Hudson's Bay shoreline, used to being human flagpoles, used to being Canada's biggest afterthought, an afterthought of every government riddled with Alzheimer's, an afterthought named the forgotten ones. The forgotten ones who can still go hungry in 2023. The forgotten ones with 22 people crowded into one house. Do not move, or you lose your sleeping spot. The sleeping spot you marked with the stench of you. The forgotten ones are made even more forgettable if they dare to move south of 60. The land claims made sure of one thing, the thing called don't you dare. Don't you dare try to make a better life for yourself. Don't you dare think that your kids deserve a chance at a better education, a chance of being someone with a university degree, someone who practices law or nursing or teaching outside of the invisible borders that confine us into a tight little cluster of long ago. Don't you dare dream of a future. Don't you dare dream that you have somewhere to go when there is nowhere to go. Don't you dare dream that once you are south, people will look at you as one of them. You're a freak on a city sidewalk, panhandling his life away, a freak who cannot talk without that accent. Anyways, a freak in the limbo of north and south. South is purgatory. South is where you get asked if all your kids have the same dad. South is where you cannot apply for northern scholarships. South is where you get asked if you're Spanish. South is where you are not really Inuit if you are not eating raw meat. South is where speaking Inuktitut makes you real. South is where you are asked if you can speak Cantonese. South is where you get to disappoint people twice in under 60 seconds. South is where the Inuk head glaringly sits on Stat Canada charts. South is where StatsCan's graph shows that you finished high school. South is where StatsCan graphs will make you look like a success. South is where you get a job because you are Inuk. South is where university degrees tucked inside of your back pockets just don't count. South is where you get hired because a boss has to fill her Indigenous quota. South is where you get used for your community contacts. South is where white people harvest your inherent knowledge. South is where exploitation of who and what you are happens. South is where the northern Inuit look down their small noses at you. South is where you are neither home nor away. What if Inuit stopped letting invisible lines divide us? Lines that we cannot see or touch or smell. What if we, Inuit, fell into each other? What if future we, Inuit, were people without gravity, nose-diving into love with one another, twisting and twirling and twitching, flooding themselves in the rapture of angelic care toward one another? What if Inuit Nunanuchat, our homeland, was here and everywhere, and future we, Inuit, recognized each other as the family of the people? No matter where we stand, we are not the remnants of long ago. We are here, we are now, we are the shadows of each other, wrapped in the cocoon of Creator's hand. A cocoon spun with the fondness of our future selves. Let us Inuit hold hands. Let us Inuit skip together into future we Inuit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Norma. I really wanted to start with a reading because, as I was telling Norma, most of her books came out during the pandemic. And the road to publication, the road to sharing your poetry, your short stories, your writing with the world, it took a long time. And you talk about it in your writing. You talk about being a writer in your poetry and the path that you had to take to get there. So what does it feel like now to be here in Quebec City, to be face to face with some of your readers and maybe some new readers, some future readers, and hearing your voice?
I do want to talk about when Eskimo Pie, my first little volume of poems, came out.
I have it right here if people want to take a look.
There was a launch via Zoom, and my editor, he came on and, he blah, 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 this is Norma Dunning, da, da, da. He does all that. And then I start to read, but I keep watching the time, and I can feel my voice is getting sore. And I keep watching and watching. And finally, like the little, along the top of the Zoom link, how we see each other in these little squares. Well, there's my editor, and he's in a lounge chair at home, like pushed right back, sound asleep. And I'm thinking, like we're on Zoom, and it's not like I can go, hey, buddy, I can't. And so I say, okay, Robert, I'm going to do just 2 more. And he didn't move. And so I read one, and I keep looking, and I'm thinking he's got to wake up. Like you're my editor. I put my editor to sleep. Isn't that nice? And so then I just stopped. And so I think the silence is what. And then he sprang out of his. But I mean, he was flat out, and there were so many people where I saw their feet. So I don't know, maybe everybody fell asleep. And as I'm reading, I'm thinking, well, now I'm just reading to people's feet. I hope they love it.
That is
incredible.
That's incredible. Incredible is definitely the word that comes to mind because I can't imagine falling asleep listening to the stories that you share.
Well, and teaching on Zoom, mm-hmm. I had students who would say to me, oh, Dr. Dunning, your voice, it just puts me to sleep. And I have the best naps when we're together on Zoom. And so I would always say, well, I'm glad I contributed positively to your life today.
Permission to nap while listening to poetry.
So don't fall asleep, please.
I promise.
Nobody can fall asleep today.
I'm glad you brought up Eskimo Pie, Poetics of Inuit Identity. It was published in 2020.
Yeah.
And there are echoes of this book in your future publications that we see some of the stories get more meat on the bones and get more in depth. But since we're starting by talking about this book, I wanted to ask you about your choice to use the term Eskimo in 2023. Why is that important for you?
I know it, and I fought for 7.5 years to have the Edmonton football team change its name. And at first it would be the only time I knew Grey Cup was coming up is that I would start to get these phone calls about, hey, what do you think about that team name? And so that was a long kind of hard battle. And the last year, when the team finally made that decision, I had so many threats come into email and into Facebook Messenger, and Norma Dunning, you bitch, I'm gonna slice your throat. I know where you live, blah, blah, blah. And I would think, man, people really love their teams, that to be able to go to that extreme. And so for me, when I make use of Eskimo, it is, for me, it's kind of fun. But that was actually the name of that ice cream bar. It was
Yes.
actually called Eskimo Pie.
For people who haven't read the book,
Yeah.
there's a representation of an ad, which you speak back to in poem form, and I'll pass it around. So here is the ad that you see early on page 12 in Eskimo Pie, and you speak back to it, and you use the same rhythm and cadence, and is it cathartic for you to write in that way, to like speak back to something that's specifically?
It's harder.
It's harder?
It's harder because you're sitting there and you're like when you're doing that kind of a talk back, you have to know the meter in each sentence. And so it's like da 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 da. But then like where's the emphasis inside of that meter? And then it's getting to that one word that will da da, it hits, like you have to, so it's a lot of writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And that's really all writing is, it's just rewriting.
You mentioned Edmonton, and I wanted to talk about place, in part because I feel a shared kinship with the question of, where are you from? I also grew up on military bases, as did you, and you mentioned Edmonton was home for quite some time.
Long time.
How does place, where you grew up, how short you lived in many of these places, how did that shape what you wanted to share as a writer who does still really understand, as we just heard in that poem, the emphasis on the north versus south? How does that play into your work?
Well, like we moved every 2 years, and you fall into that. And so even after my sons are born, I'm thinking, it's time to move. We all better be moving somewhere. I have no idea where, but we better be moving. And I think I was fortunate to see as much of Canada as I did coming up. And I think there are so many Canadians who still don't get to see or make that effort to travel within our own country and to really spend time, and getting to know Canadians in Canada. So I think that side of it, I was very, very fortunate that way. But I never felt unsettled. I never felt like I didn't belong or anything, because when you're a military kid...
You have that kinship. You're a military brat.
That's right. That's right. So the sergeant kids hang around with the sergeant kids, and the officers' kids get away with everything at school, on base.
I was definitely thinking of particular past students I had encountered on different military bases. I also wanted to ask you if it was intentional to not name the military bases or even the provinces where they were located in a lot of your poetry. It's usually just military housing, or when you're describing being in the kitchen. I immediately see the same kind of, as we call them, PMQs.
To, like in our military kitchen, that because it was like standardized housing, everybody had the same house, and we always had, like, we never had a standalone house. Like, we always were in a duplex at least, and I say I had to leave home to get my own bedroom. like that was the incentive to leave. I'm going to have my own bedroom.
How many siblings did you have growing up?
I have 3 brothers, 2 sisters.
And I also wanted, when people choose to put this in the biography, I like to ask them about it. You put grandmother. You don't put mother and grandmother, you put grandmother. Why is that an important thing to put front and center when we're getting to meet you?
It's the best thing to be. It's so much better than being a mother, really. Like honestly, the grandkids, like, they're so much better than the originals, honestly. Like, they are so much more. They are. They're just fun. They can't do anything wrong. Like, they're beautiful. And I like carrying that title of grandma. I do. I like it.
In getting to know your work, I did a little bit of digging. I went back, and I found this book that you helped bring back to life that was initially published in 1978, called Life Among the Kalunat. Am I pronouncing that?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's the story of Minnie Aodla Freeman's story growing up in 1978. And I'd never heard of it before. And in just reading a little bit about it, you discover at one point this woman has written her life story, she's found a publisher, the book is going to be ready and out in the world. It's in her voice. It's very unique for what it was in 1978. For a lot of people who may know Maria Campbell's Half-Breed, it was almost a predecessor to that in 1978, where Half-Breed came out in the early 80s. But at one point, Minnie discovers that more than half of the books that were published of the first run were sitting in the basement of what was then the Department of Indian Affairs. And the suspicion, or I guess I'll put this question to you, how did you discover more about that and why, how this book was suppressed, whether it was suppressed? What was that like being one of, you did this work alongside Kiwi Martin and Julie Rack? Mm-hmm. What was that like?
No, see, I was the student at that time. So I was hired to go through all of Mel Hurtig, and he was the publisher, all of his papers. And I thought, like, I can't believe this guy, like, I swear he kept every Kleenex he sneezed into. He had so much stuff, like his personal papers were unreal. But when we're talking about that kind of holding back of a published book, one of the understandings that I have from other publishers is when Indigenous authors published, often half of the books would be held back and then extended as gifts to different people who were coming into Parliament, into Canada. And
half, though, it's a substantial amount. In this case, I think it was something like 3,000 books.
I don't know if we have an actual number on that. And so for me, the working on that book, it had more to do with, for me, to get to know Minnie Outlaw Freeman better and to be able to spend time with her. And I know that she had her original manuscript.
And there's one recreation of the first page, and you remember how writing was different in the 70s and how it's the cadence and the rhythm, and it's very much her voice.
And even having her name spelled M-I-N-I, that would have been her Inuit name would have been Mini, and she was born on a night of soft rain, and Mini means soft rain. And but through her government work, she had to spell her name M-I-N-N-I-E, and when she asked to go back to the original spelling, government said no. So, that's... Anyway, like for me, the fun part was getting to know Minnie better.
Yes, and you do share in many of the writing that you've shared with the world, getting to know specific elders and getting them to share their stories. I'm thinking of, in this book, making sure I open it the right way, in Kinavwit, What's Your Name? The Eskimo Disc System and a Daughter's Search for Her Grandmother. You immediately want to introduce us to people and hear the stories. We have Alan Voisey, David Serkoak, Martha Hatkoet. You interview a lot of these people in their homes as well.
Yes.
How does that inform your writing now as a poet and short stories and all of the future writing that you've led to?
I think, I think people really have to understand how Inuit talk, so when and there's protocol that you have to adhere to. So for an elder, I can never say to them, okay, Paul, this is why I'm here. I cannot. Protocol, I have to wait for them to say, so why are you here? And as soon as they allow that, then I can ask questions. And I think people don't understand that. And often when Inuit are asked a question, there'll be a pause. It's like question, long pause. And I've had non-Inuit, non-Indigenous researchers say to me, like, what is the matter with them? And there's nothing the matter with them. It's just we're slow to answer, and I think that Inuit are often much more thoughtful. And his name is John Glurigak. He talks about how, people will say Helenot, and that's white. But for my dialect, it's Kabluna. That means white man. But that John, he will talk about how, one of the things he was told about Helenot, it means people who want an answer now. And that was like one of the definitions. So it's, you have to understand too, as Indigenous writers, like I adhere to protocol in my writing. And I represent all of my family, all of my relations, all Inuit when I publish. And I have to keep that in mind. And so I'd written an article about how writing is ceremony, because there's a lot that there's only so much that you can let out into the world. And I think that many of our stories will never go into print. I pray they never do, and that our knowledge keepers will always hold on to them.
Why do you pray they never do?
I don't think they're deserved. It's bottom line. It's not
something
deserved.
That should be earned.
No, it's something that is sacred, and so we keep what is sacred.
I love the way you are honest with the positive and negative experiences you've had in your path to becoming a poet, because a lot of people shy away from that. Mm-hmm. And you say on multiple occasions, why would an Inuit want to get a PhD? Why would they want to go to university? It's a miracle that any Inuit finish. Why is it important for you to share that side in your poems in sometimes kind of acerbic tones, but why is that important to center at times?
Because I want especially young people, young Inuit, to be inspired and to know that they can achieve and they can be successful. And it's not about bragging. It's not about, hey, look at me. I'm old. Like, it's about young people. It's not about me ever. And, in 2011, and now we can say that's a dated figure, but in 2011, Canada had 40 Inuit PhD holders, 40. 20 were medical doctors, and all medical doctors have to write a PhD thesis. So, when we look at that huge rate of attrition, especially in Nunavut, where, 24 kids out of 100 will graduate high school. And so what is going on? And it's very, very easy to say, well, what's the matter with those kids? Mm-hmm. There's nothing the matter with those kids. What is wrong is the curriculum is wrong. And so the Alberta curriculum is taught in Nunavut. So how does a kid out there on the tundra, how do they relate to milk cows and wheat fields? They don't. And so we have to really, we have to shift our thinking and, shift those paradigms that Western education, especially what they hold on to as valuable and as success.
That leads me to the work that you're doing with the First Nations University. Can you tell us more about the work you do in academia? I shouldn't laugh, You can laugh.
I mean, they did hire me. That was nice. But I'm teaching for the very first time Indigenous health. And so what do I know about that? Just about nothing. So every Tuesday, I teach a group from 11 until 2 in the afternoon. And it's like every Tuesday is like a crapshoot. It's like, okay, this is what I think I'll talk about. And I always go in with like 1, 2, 3. These are the points I have to get across. But so I teach mainly U of R students. So the University of Regina students have to come over and walk into First Nations University. And I think there's a certain amount of discomfort. It's a beautiful, university. It has a gorgeous ceremony area. Smudge is available to anybody. And so I think there's kind of, and I like that they're discomforted and have to come in through and walk through that ceremony space and then come up to my room. But I think I have, the group I have right now, it's the first time I'm teaching 40 students and not one of them are white. So I don't have any white people in my room. So it makes it easier for me to be able to say white people. But it's a beautiful opportunity, and I think what they offer to Indigenous students should be offered in every university.
I'm immediately going to go Google architecture of the First Nations University afterwards. I honestly, I was learning a bit. I hadn't heard much about it until I was looking into your path, and I didn't even know that existed on the West. That happens sometimes when place and location. You talk, I wanted to note what you begin this book with Eskimo Paya Poetics of Inuit Identity. Silence is not golden, and to all those who believed I was a poet before I did. Mm-hmm. Would you be comfortable sharing those who told you were a poet before you knew you were?
Well, through my BA and MA, with that work, I always took creative writing. And so as you're going higher up into 500, 600 level courses, the profs, your classes become smaller and smaller, and the profs choose who is coming into their room. So you're kind of this elite group of students. But there was this one guy, and he, one day, what we had to do was we would write a poem a week, and then we had to share it on a Moodle site, and we read each other's work, but we also had to print off our work to be brought into class. And this one guy, this one day, he holds up my paper, and he says, "Norma Dunning, you write shit." And every week, all of us have to read your shit. And we're sick of it. And I'd like you to know there's not a publisher in the world that's going to look at you. And so I'm sitting there and I think, well, now I have a choice. I can stand up and trash this kid, or I can go home and write so much shit over the next week that they have so much more they have to read. So that's what I did. I went home and just wrote so much more shit.
Take that.
So but you know, I went into university, I was almost 51, I'd never been to university, I was unemployed, and I thought, I'll stick it out for a year and see if the money works. Well, the money kept working out, but I became very scholarship dependent, very, very scholarship, and I always worked 2 or 3 jobs. And you're in there and you're competing against very young, sharp minds, you know, and and so you got to take those hits every now and again. Mm-hmm. But it's what do you do with it? So what do you do with it? Do I burst into tears because a 25-year-old said you write garbage? You know, so I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yeah, and often how silent so many people who experience that kind of violence in the institutions. I've had that conversation with people at different stages of their academic careers, being like, once I accepted that being part of this institution involves a certain level of violence, it made it easier for me to accept that that's part of the experience, as opposed to like these shining, like you get these beautiful letters at the end of your name after you put in the work. I wanted to talk about having your work translated into French, and I wanted to talk about this beautiful book, Tainna, which was translated by Daniel Grenier, who's here with us this afternoon, and published by Mémoire d'Encrier, which has done a lot of translation of Indigenous writers across Canada. I guess I want to go to the beginning. How did you react the first time someone came to you and said, I want to publish your book in French, as someone who...
It's so unbelievable to me. And I'm just so honored, because Mémoire d'un écrit and the translator are, they're very careful. And I think they're not, I don't want to say cautious, but I think they're tender, towards what I write. What I write is not always easy. And it's just a gift. It's an absolute gift. And that group has been so kind to me. They're awesome. They're incredible.
And there's the particular element of the fact that you were born in Quebec. And at one point when you were a young girl and you asked your mother, what am I? Where are we from? What am I? She answered you, tell people you were born in Quebec, you're French.
That's right.
What is it like for you now to have this story that is so much about being Inuit, that is so much your voice, your life, the work that you've done, the conversations you've had with other Inuit elders? What is it like to have... What was the first time when you I want to talk about like opening the box of books, or the first time you got your hands on it?
I just cry about it. Every time a book comes, I just bawl.
And you describe it as a birth. In one of your poems, that you talk about the difficult experience of a book.
And I cry over them. And when Annie first published, the publisher calls, they go, oh, your book's here. And it was like, I was so afraid to see her. And I waited about 4 days, and then and all I could do, like, they bring her, and I just burst into tears. And it's like that with every book. I just cry over them, and I cry because I want them to do well and to make a difference, and especially to influence because I've met young Inuit who will not make application into their land claims area because they will say, because I've never been north. But that isn't what makes you, location is not what makes you Inuit. It is not. And so I write a great deal about identity. And it's in the hopes that, all those young Inuit out there who think, well, I've never been north, or, that was my grandma and grandpa or my mom and dad, that they have the courage to step forward, make that application, and stand tall.
And stand proud. One of the things I really love about this translation, in part, is when the first page, when you open it, I'm going to read it in French because I forgot the English version with me, but it says, Nous sommes des Inuits, peu importe où nous nous trouvons, Inuktitut, nous les Inuits, nous sommes là. We are here, regardless of where we are born, where we live. And it's in bold font. What did you think when you saw that choice to have that front and center right as you open the book?
I love it. And I think a lot of, it's beautiful, the way Mémoire d'un écrit, the way Danielle put it together is just gorgeous. What they did, like their work, you see that love, in what they produce. But a lot of the stuff I do is kind of in your face, and some people find that upsetting, and so I like what they did.
Lastly, you were talking there about the work you do with students, with young people, what you hope moves things forward, what you hope change things. Have there been moments where readers have reached out that really stand out in your mind, where you feel like, okay, it's worth the tears, it's worth the fear that maybe your baby book won't have the life you want for it?
Yeah. I've had that where people, I don't know who they are, but they'll email and they'll say, one lady, your book saved my life. And like, that's just like, wow, really? It was just like, it's amazing what people, how kind they've been, how generous they've been. And it's good to know that somewhere out there, somebody benefited from one